So welcome everyone. Let us start. So today we were thinking that we can continue the release first from heart and mind, then the release from the subjection to body, and then the release from the ego. Yeah, this one. So synthesis of yoga here, chapter 7, we have touched upon the release from subjection to body. Then chapter 8, oh, I'm so sorry. Chapter 8, release from the heart and the mind. And then today we thought we will continue with release from the ego. Yeah, this one. So let's go ahead and read it first. The first paragraph. Yeah, anyone who would like to go ahead and read it aloud, please, you're welcome to do so.
Monica, I'll go.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the release from the ego. The formation of a mental and vital ego tied to the body sense was the first great labor of the cosmic life in its progressive evolution. For this was the means it found for sorry I got confused in the lines, found creating out of matter a conscious individual. The dissolution of this limiting ego is the one condition, the necessary means for this very same life to arrive at its divine fruition. For only so can the conscious individual find either his transcendent self or his true person. This double movement is usually represented as a fall and a redemption, or a creation and a destruction. The kindling of a light and its extinction, or the formation first of a smaller temporary and unreal self, and a release from it into our true self's eternal largeness. For human thought falls apart towards two opposite extremes. One, mundane and pragmatic, regards the fulfillment and satisfaction of the mental, vital, and physical ego sense, individual or collective, as the object of life and looks no farther, while the other, spiritual, philosophic, or religious, regards the conquest of the ego in the interests of the soul, spirit, or whatever be the ultimate entity, as the one thing supremely worth doing. So I'll continue. Yeah. Even in the camp of the ego, there are two divergent attitudes which divide mundane or materialist theory of the universe. One tendency of this thought regards the mental ego as a creation of our mentality, which will be dissolved with the dissolution of mind by the death of the body. The one abiding truth is eternal nature working in the race, this or another, and her purpose should be followed, not ours. The fulfillment of the race, the collective ego, and not that of the individual should be the rule of life. Another trend of thought, more vitalistic in its tendencies, fixes on the conscious ego as the supreme achievement of nature, no matter how transitory, ennobles it into human representative of the will to be, and holds up its greatness and satisfaction as the highest aim of our existence. In the more numerous systems that take their stand on some kind of religious thought or spiritual discipline, there is a corresponding divergence. The Buddhist denies the existence of real self or ego, admits no universal or transcendent being. The Advaitin declares the apparently individual soul to be none other than the Supreme Self and Brahman, its individuality an illusion. The putting off of individual existence is the only true release. Other systems assert in flat contradiction of this view. The eternal persistence of the human soul, a basis of multiple consciousness in the one, or else a dependent but still separate entity. It is constant, real, imperishable.
Yeah, thank you. So as we see, Sri Aurobindo builds up, as in Synthesis of Yoga specifically, we see that he's building up and then taking it to the highest possible that he sees for all of us. So starting from what was the need of the ego, because since we see that it is there, we may deny that yes, when we try to find a self, there is no self that we can find, there is no separate self, and hence non-dualists, or like as you were sharing, Buddhists would say that there is no self, in the sense that there is no separate self. And when we try to find within that who is this little me that I consider myself to be, if we dig deeper, we only can see that yes, there is just awareness that is present, but there is no separate entity called me. Right? So he takes us there, but in integral yoga, we don't say that the ego is not there. We talk about the why ego is necessary in the process of evolution. Why was it created? That we feel this sense of separate self. What was the need of feeling this separate self? And that's why in at other places, Mother Sri Aurobindo, they talk about that. For example, Mother says we talk about surrender. If we are talking about now surrendering to something higher, then I have to see that what would I surrender? If I am just like a jelly-like mass and I don't even know my boundaries and everything is just mixed up together, then what would I surrender to the higher? So it's very important that I develop in the process of evolution, which has its purpose to develop a sense of self. So society may want this, but what do I want? Society says that money is important, but what is important for me? So then a separate sense of self develops, where you develop your own thought, your own reasoning, your own, what you feel right, what your own opinions. So in this process of evolution, it is very important, I believe, that we don't come to the aspect of surrender very quickly. It is very important, like we won't talk to this aspect of surrender to someone growing up like a teenager. Like a teenager, we would talk about developing his sense of self. Okay, what are your passions? What are your hobbies? What do you like? What do you want to spend time in? So you are developing an individuality. It may be a temporary individuality, which is the ego sense of self, which later on, as it develops and grows further, and you are now an individual. You don't always do what the people and friends say, but you have your own thoughts, your own opinion. You're distinct from the mass of suggestions. Then now, after some years, when you're ready and ripe, you can reach the limits of this temporary individuality, and then think about, if the process allows, if the path allows, of offering this little ego to the highest, because you see the limitations of it also now. So earlier it serves a purpose to get us distinct from the society and whatever the rest of the suggestions and the collective that is there, that these are my opinions, my ideas, and then slowly we give it off, like we offer it. We let the wave merge back into the ocean. So that's what in the first paragraph he's like developing on that. It seems that the formation of a mental and vital ego. So this is what I think, my mental ego. This is what I believe in. And the vital ego, the feelings, emotions, you know, tied to the body sense. And who is thinking? This person who is this body, right? So mental and vital ego is tied to the body sense. My feelings are different from your feelings. So again, that body sense is separate. Was the first great labor of the cosmic life in its progressive evolution, for this was the means it found for creating out of matter a conscious individual who knows that he is something. This is me. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. The dissolution of this limiting ego is the one condition, the necessary means for this very same life to arrive at its divine fruition. But the journey doesn't end at just being a conscious individual. The journey goes on. So from stone, we become a plant. From plant, we become an animal. From animal, a mental being. And the journey still is going on. We don't end here. So ego has to be again offered, given up for its divine fruition. For only so can the conscious individual find either his transcendent self or his true person. Once I know that, oh, this is me, and then later on I realize the limits of this limited me, then I can talk about dissolution of this me. But when there is no me, who will talk about the dissolution of me and going higher? You know? So we see this in, for example, say animals and plants. There may be a sense of self, but it's not like this is me and I have to walk this path. It is like instinct based. Of course, they are themselves, but there is no like this mental consciousness which says that this is me and I have to dissolve and I have to go further. That furthering is in the human individual, human being. So this, he says that this dissolution is one condition to arrive at the divine, what the journey that we are meant for. For only so can the conscious individual find either his transcendent self, that I am more than the limited self, that I am more than the ego, or his true person, our psychic individuality. Who are we truly? What are we meant to do truly in this life? This double movement is usually represented as a fall. First we fall into the ego sense, separate self, right? All of us, first as we are born, the upper lid closes, we become separate from the cosmic consciousness, universal consciousness. We develop a sense of little me, this is me, that is you, that gets developed. So this double movement is usually represented as a fall and a redemption, or a creation and a destruction. So first, creation of an ego, and then a destruction. The kindling of a light and its extinction, or the formation first of a smaller, temporary and unreal self, which is the ego sense of self, this little me, and a release from it into our true self, eternal largeness. This is the path of yoga. Why is yoga necessary? Because there is a sense of separate self. And because we are not just that. Because we are more than the sense of separate self. That is why yoga can happen. If we were only this little me and satisfied with that, then there would be no need and place for yoga. Just yeah, sorry for that. So I think this is very promising to me when I'm reading this. It's very promising because it tells us that we are meant for something more, all of us. And that's why human birth is considered so precious, that yes, it is limiting. Yes, it is, we can go very low down in our consciousness, but at the same time, we can also rise above all the consciousnesses. That's why human birth is considered so special. So, first, the kindling of a light and its extinction. So, first, the ego self develops, like this is me. As teenager, in puberty, we are developing a sense of individuality. This is me. There is a lot of rebellion there. I don't want what you want. I want what I want. So that sense of I is developing. So first kindling of a light, then its extinction, or in other words, formation first of a smaller, temporary and unreal self, and a release from it into our true self, eternal largeness. And that is why we do all these sessions, to get in touch with that largeness, to know that we are beyond our stories. We are beyond our life happening. We are not just what has happened to us. We are just something more than that. For human thought falls apart towards two opposite extremes, one mundane and pragmatic, regards the fulfillment and satisfaction of the mental, vital, and physical ego sense, individual or collective, as the object of life. Like, what are we meant for? We are here so that we can settle into little families, we can have our little children, you know, um, succumb to our daily, fulfill our daily needs, have bread and butter, a little bit of property, little bit of wealth. So these are mundane, pragmatic, practical, fulfillment of daily needs, all the bread and butter of life. That's what human thoughts fall into two opposite extremes. So one is this regular affairs of day-to-day life. That's where we are mostly grossly involved, either fulfilling our own ego or fulfilling collective ego. What does society want from me? What is the expectation of parents from this person who is the daughter or the son? So collective ego we keep on satisfying. If people want us to be married, we get married. We don't even know that what do we really want. So fulfilling that sense, and looks no further. While the other extreme of the human thought, spiritual, philosophic, or religious, regards the conquest of the ego in the interests of the soul, spirit, or whatever be the ultimate entity, as the one thing supremely worth doing. So these are the two extremes happening to the same human being, either involved in the daily affairs of fulfilling the needs of separate self or the collective separate self, or then looking beyond everything and seeing that how long can we remain satisfied in this littleness? Is that the only destiny for us, or is there something more? And if there is something more, how to get there? How to realize that largeness and vastness which we so crave for? So this is what he shares, like, beautifully, that these are the two extremes of human thought. So we'll just take a pause here and take more reflections if there are any until here. Then we can go forward. Yeah, any suggestions, any thoughts there?
I am actually live seeing this in my 8-year-old these days, because just because of the upbringing, there is a lot of freedom, right? Like, what do I want? I want this, I don't want this. And mostly children are supposed to conform, right? Like an ideal child, the obedient child, the respectful child. So right now he's like here and not, he has not, it's like it's the me is fully developed, but it's not grounded yet. It's not humbled yet. So, it feels like, oh my God, what to do, right? It feels like a dynamite that I don't want this. Like, kind of what we see usually in teenage, right? That's when one is kind of discovering oneself, the same essence of it, right? That how when we see that first we are like me, and then slowly with life one gets grounded, one gets humbled and stuff. So yeah, so it was very reflective that of course one is the journey of the cosmos and thing, and yet when we look at the everyday, we can see it in the different stages of a human life too. That how first it's all about, first it's nothing, right? Totally devoted. Then it's like, okay, me, and then, and again has to be ideally. It feels beautiful if it's again devoted, and yeah, that's all.
Sometimes, I can say I feel frustrated that why does this have to be repeated with every individual? Why can't we learn? But we can't. And, fortunately or unfortunately, as everyone has their own unfolding and journey. And it's really crazy that how it has to be repeated, this whole process of first being ungrounded off the ground and then again, being grounded, since every soul has its own unique journey. And we may say that these are our children, but they have actually their own unique soul journeys, which we have no idea of, just like we have no idea of our own journeys. So, yes, interesting. Yeah, anything else, anyone? Okay, so assuming nothing, going ahead. So, even in the camp of the ego, there are two divergent attitudes which divide the mundane or materialist theory of the universe. One tendency of this thought regards the mental ego, this as a creation of our mentality, that it's just the hallucination of our mind that I'm thinking of myself as a separate entity. So mind is creating that ego. One tendency of this thought regards the mental ego as a creation of our mentality, which will be dissolved with the dissolution of mind by the death of the body. The one abiding truth is eternal nature working in the race, either this race or another race, and her purpose, that nature's purpose, should be followed, not ours. And what is nature's purpose? Fulfillment of the race, collective ego. So we human beings, many people actually they believe it's true that we human beings, if we don't reproduce, who will reproduce? So I have talked to many people, and they think that as if pura, the whole earth is dependent upon them for the continuation of race. But that is how nature works. It's like this pressure uh, that is uh, that we feel as if we are the ones taking forward all these races. And if not for us, what will happen? So, this collective ego and not that of the individual should be the rule of life. So, whether I want to have a child or not, that doesn't matter because the things have to continue. I must have the child. We see it very often, in families and cultures. What would happen of that particular khandan or the family or that surname, if not for any heirs. Yeah. So this is one aspect, one tendency of thought which thinks like this. Another trend of thought, more vitalistic in its tendencies, fixes on the conscious ego as the supreme achievement of nature, no matter how transitory, ennobles it into a human representative of the will to be, and holds up its greatness and satisfaction as the highest aim of our existence. In the more numerous systems that take their stand on some kind of religious thought, or spiritual discipline, there is a corresponding divergence. So here another trend of thought is that since nature has made us into this conscious individual, this little me or this big me, then it is our responsibility, as if it's the divine will that I must be satisfied. Since this is there, what is the whole planet for? For the satisfaction of this entity, which is, that's what I'm understanding. So another trend of thought, more vitalistic in its tendencies, fixes on the conscious ego as the supreme achievement of nature, no matter how transitory, ennobles it into a human representative of the will to be, and holds up its greatness and satisfaction as the highest aim of our existence. This is another trend. Anything here? Anyone? Okay, so we go ahead. And then he goes further. In the more numerous systems that take their stand on some kind of religious thought or spiritual discipline, again there is a divergence. We see the Buddhist denies the existence of a real self or ego. So if we listen to Buddhist commentaries, they talk about no self, and that doesn't mean that there is no self. That this what what I infer is that there is no separate self to be found, which we consider as this is me. So it is like an illusion. When I'm saying this is me, where is me? So denies the real self or the ego. The ego entity is denied there, admits no universal or transcendent being. And here they say that it is anatman, and like diverging from Vedantic philosophy, where they say that there is only one Atman, they say that there is an Atman. And again, I think we don't want to go there because of lack of our expertise and knowledge. But it seems to me from present commentaries that they don't mean that there is nothing there, but they mean that there is everything is just vastly interconnected. Like there is no disconnect anywhere. So you can't say that this is me, I am here, and that another person starts somewhere else. So that I can't say that there is this self and that self. So that appears to be an illusion in Buddhist thought. The Advaitin declares the apparently individual soul to be none other than the supreme self and Brahman. There are enough Vedic commentaries, Vedantic commentaries on this, where we go to the root of everything, and what we discover, what people have discovered is like this is like the supreme self or Brahman, and that is where they are merged in that silence of that being. It's individuality and illusion. The putting off of individual existence is the only true release. So far we have seen this, that to deny the individual is the only true release. Other systems assert, in flat contradiction of this view, the eternal persistence of the human soul. That human soul is always there. It is not going anywhere. It is taking births and rebirths. I think those traditions which believe in birth and reincarnation, a basis of multiple consciousness in the one, or else a dependent but still separate entity. It is constant, real, imperishable. That is another thought. And then he, lower down, he says that then, it is for me to see where I belong right now. But anyway, these are the possibilities that are there. And how amazing is that we can choose any little path, any direction we can choose. And if we truly go towards what we can call the end, it is not possible that we don't arrive at the same truth. But we often fall short, like we stop in the middle and then form a cult or a religious, like something which like becomes very rigid, dogmatic, and then stagnancy comes and clashes come. So that happens. So anything so far anyone wants to share before we move ahead? Okay, we are going to go forward then. And if anyone wants to read, please read the next paragraph.
I can read. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So amidst, from there, amidst,
Yes, yes.
okay. Amidst these various and conflicting opinions, the seeker of the truth has to decide for himself which shall be for him the knowledge. But if our aim is a spiritual release or a spiritual fulfillment, then the exceeding of this type of this little mold of ego is imperative. In human egoism and its satisfaction, there can be no divine culmination and deliverance. A certain purification from egoism is the condition even of ethical progress and elevation, for social good and perfection. Much more is it indispensable for inner peace, purity, and joy, but much more radical deliverance, not only from egoism, but from ego idea and ego sense, and it is needed if our aim is to raise human into divine nature. Experience shows that in proportion as we deliver ourselves from the limiting mental and vital ego, we command a wider life, a larger existence, a higher consciousness, a happier soul state, even greater knowledge, power, and scope. Even the aim which the most mundane philosophy pursues, the fulfillment, perfection, satisfaction of the individual, is best assured not by satisfying the narrow ego, but by finding freedom in a higher and larger self. There is no happiness in smallness of the being, says the scripture. It is with the large being that happiness comes. The ego is by its nature the smallness of being. It brings contraction of the consciousness, and with the contraction, limitation of knowledge, disabling ignorance, confinement, and a diminution of power, and by that diminution, incapacity and weakness, a scission of oneness, and by that scission, disharmony and failure of sympathy and love and understanding, inhibition or fragmentation of the light of being, and by that fragmentation, pain and sorrow. To recover what is lost, we must break out of the walls of ego. The ego must either disappear in impersonality or fuse into a larger I. It must fuse into the wider cosmic I, which comprehends all the smaller selves, the transcendent of which even the cosmic self is a diminished image. This last sentence is very deep. Yes, I'm thinking about all the movement in the last decades of those who try to put together the Western psychology and the Eastern spirituality, and how these different seemingly contradictory stances like the ego self and the cosmic consciousness are really not things that are like there are many stances of development, and ego is a solid structure of ego. In fact, is in some point of our human evolution something that is needed. This I think Sri Aurobindo made a great influence in these thinkers like Ken Wilber or many others. Like this idea, like our human development, even before taking the yoga, our human ethical development means to go beyond our most egoistic self and try to open the boundaries and relate to vaster realities. And it's like, I think it's a gradual development, something like that.
So as you said, it's a gradual development, and depending on what phase are we in, and there is no phase that can, or no phase or no stage that can be called anything superior or inferior, since this ladder goes to infinity. And when we are talking of infinity, we can forget about superiority or inferiority, because each one of us has been at that particular step this time, next time, or whenever. So we all have to just, as if it seems like this ladder towards the infinite, and all the stages have to be touched upon. So, going with that, he says, amidst these various and conflicting opinions, the seeker of the truth has to decide for himself which shall be for him the knowledge. And it's completely fine. Some of us can be very, very convinced of Vedantic philosophy and just in this lifetime decide that this is it, and be completely content with that. And then some of us may not stop there. Some of us may say that no, there is still something more which maybe I'm missing. So they may go further, seek further. For some, some religion, or say, for example, Buddhist philosophy, or some other religious philosophies or mysticism may be it. But again, so it would just totally be dependent upon our inclinations, our stages in the progress, and there is nothing which is here that can be called superior or inferior. And all of us just have to go through all these stages. So we have to decide for himself, the speaker has to decide for himself which shall be for him the knowledge. But if our aim is a spiritual release or a spiritual fulfillment, and only we can know that whether in this lifetime that calls me. If our aim is a spiritual release or a spiritual fulfillment, then the exceeding of this little mold of ego is imperative. So we won't be able to stop short anywhere, but before we go forward and march forward towards this release from this suffocating mold of the ego. So each one of us will be called for that, and I don't think it can be forced upon. There has to be some willingness, some receptivity, some openness that the light can come pouring in and show me the way. And in human egoism and its satisfaction, there can be no divine culmination and deliverance. A certain purification from egoism is the condition even of ethical progress and elevation. So, in general, if we want to have a decently good life, there also, if we have a very big ego or a very little ego, it keeps on troubling us. So, what, for example, Jessurma talks about is cultivating a healthy sense of ego. Which, for example, the example she uses is that if you have a broken foot, again and again your attention goes to that foot. Oh my God, it's paining, it's hurting. And if, for example, right now, if everybody is okay with their stomach, have you been thinking about your stomach all these minutes that we have been talking of? We have not been thinking about our stomach because the stomach is in healthy state. So when there is a healthy sense of ego, we don't keep obsessively focused about our own little self. It doesn't matter much. The attention is not that much on the little me. So even he says that even if it's like this one, a certain purification from egoism is the condition even of ethical progress and elevation for social good and perfection. In general, we want to have a good, decent, good, happy life, uncomplicated. It helps if we have a healthy sense of self. Much more is it indispensable for inner peace, purity, and joy. This healthy sense of self. That you don't bother much about who is giving you attention, who is rejecting you, who is insulting you. You're able to very easily ignore, and be easy and relaxed. Yeah, anything here? Anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. This thing, this but if our aim is a spiritual release or a spiritual fulfillment, then the exceeding of this little mold of ego is imperative, imperative. So just to put it in everyday vocabulary, when we say that I am more than my story, right? This is it, right? Like that is me exceeding the little mold of ego, like in simpler terms.
Yeah. Yes. And that is why it helps to say what we were discussing, in which one. I think this one only, the subjection, release from the subjection of the body. When we were again and again stepping back from thoughts, stepping back from feelings, body sense, and just exactly what you said, that I am beyond all this. I am all this, but I am much, much, much more and beyond all these things that I consider myself to be. Yeah.
So we all have sticky points. We all have, places where we are more attached to stories that we can't let go of. So this what is there, right? That for us to actually be happy, because in the littleness, happiness is not there, right? And that's where I keep getting pulled. And this is like providing me an opportunity that you are more than this, right? And it's so attractive, it's so convoluted, it's so muddled up, and yet till I am there suffering or pain, or and then I wonder why life is like this. And when, according to this, when I'm able to step up, no matter what my school of thought is about ego or what my story is, if I can get up or step aside or anything, like in that regard, that I'm more than this
Yeah.
and I'm no longer a puppet, even once, if I'm able to take a stand and say, no more, not this time. That is me
Yes.
stepping out of the little mold of ego.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this said in a different language, but this is our actually life experience in life, that whenever we have been able to step aside from our stories, and our stories really complicate us and make us so suffocated and narrow, and suffering comes and turmoil comes. But whenever we have been through any which means able to step aside, we have felt that release that he talks of. So we have been given glimpses. Yes. Yeah. Mm. And that is why I think many times we also talk about how, if I want to take a further decision or anything, we talk about how am I feeling? Am I feeling suffocated, or am I feeling expanded or empowered? So to go forward and take that decision. Yeah. Now, egoism is one thing, and another is the ego idea. Hmm? But a much more radical deliverance, not only from egoism, but from ego idea and ego sense is needed. So, egoism, what I understand from Mother's words, is egoism is this obsession about one's own self, like me at the center of everything. And ego idea and ego sense is generally this existence of the ego self, which is anyway there. Whether I admit it or not, it is there. It is holding my mental, vital, physical together, the sense of ego. This is me. And then egoism is obsession about me, like me at the center of everything. Why is not everyone giving me attention? Why is everyone, praising me or not praising me? So that is egoism. So, but a much more radical deliverance, not only from egoism, but also from ego idea and ego sense, is needed if our aim is to raise human into divine nature. Now, this is not for everyone in this lifetime. Not everyone would be called to the ridding of the ego sense in this lifetime. Hmm? Experience shows that in proportion as we deliver ourselves from the limiting mental and vital ego, we command a wider life, a larger existence, a higher consciousness, a happier soul state, even a greater knowledge, power, and scope. How beautiful! I mean, very liberating, even these words. So, even our experience, all of us who are present here today, if we look at our experience, we will see that the any moment we have been able to step aside from me and my stories and this limited self, we have felt that wideness, expansion, and a release and a happier sense of self within, happier soul state, and empowerment, as if power comes back to you the moment you let go of this limited sense of self. And the more we stick to it, our power drains away. So it is like a signal, like a red signal, that don't go there, don't go there. And yet again, we all have our journey, so we do go there time to time. Even the aim which the most mundane philosophy pursues, the fulfillment, perfection, satisfaction of the individual, is best assured not by satisfying the narrow ego, but by finding freedom in a higher and larger sense. So, even when we talk about these thoughts that we talked about earlier, where it says that since I am the ego self and the nature has built me like that, so the only purpose for me is to satisfy this ego self. Keep satisfying, keep consuming, and keep it happy. So, even if we talk about that, we will see that actually the ego sense cannot be happy if it always is focused on itself. So, again, repeating his words, even the aim which the most mundane philosophy pursues, the fulfillment, perfection, satisfaction of the individual, if we think that that is what we are born for, is best assured not by satisfying the narrow ego, but by finding freedom in a higher and larger self. And we all know that whenever our little greeds and satisfactions and all our wants and desires, haven't they been fulfilled so many times? And yet it remains like empty stomach, that ego sense. So even if we want to fulfill the ego through this philosophy, thought, coming from this thought, even then it seems right that by consuming what I want to consume, the sense of ego cannot ever be satisfied. There is no happiness in smallness of the being, says the scripture. It is with the large being that happiness comes. And that is why, in Buddhism, many times we hear that whenever maybe you're feeling say greedy for something which is last piece of it is left, just notice that greed and just offer it to someone else, and feel that expansion in you. So there is no happiness in the smallness of the being, says the scripture. It is with the large being that happiness comes. And when we give, that is why kindness, compassion, and giving, generosity is one of the precepts in Buddhism. Just give. Don't bother whether you have it or not. Just give. And that giving brings us a largeness. It connects us with our vaster self. The ego is by its nature a smallness of being. It brings contraction. I think all of us must have felt this contraction when we are lost in our stories. The ego is by its nature a smallness of being. It brings contraction of the consciousness, and with the contraction, limitation of knowledge. Like a blindness, I can't see, I don't know. Disabling ignorance, confinement, and a diminution of power. We feel less empowered when we are in the ego sense. And by that diminution, incapacity and weakness. Fission of oneness, like a rupture of that oneness, since I am the little me and rest everything is so vast and great, and I am the empty one. Fission of that oneness, and by that fission, disharmony and failure of sympathy and love and understanding. Inhibition or fragmentation of delight. All of us, I'm sure, have felt all these things that he's sharing. Inhibition or fragmentation of delight of being, and by that fragmentation, pain and sorrow. What would happen to this little me who is cut off and fragmented from the vast rest of the universe? To recover what is lost, we must break out of the walls of ego. The ego must either disappear in impersonality, like a wave crashes back in the ocean, no more a wave. So impersonal. The ego must either disappear in impersonality or fuse into a larger I. What we were sharing earlier, that I am beyond all the stories, and so are all of us beyond our stories. And that vast being is just interconnected. It must fuse into the wider cosmic I. That thoughts and feelings, they're cosmic. So if they're happening now, and in explaining cosmic consciousness, one of the things which I came across, Sri Aurobindo says that when we realize cosmic consciousness or touch upon the cosmic consciousness, we still have an individuality. We still feel that, oh, I am the self. But we see this self as a very minute presence in front of what we have touched upon. Like, oh, this is my possibility, and this little thing is here. So that vastness we get in touch with cosmic consciousness. So it must fuse into the wider cosmic eye. So for example, jealousy, if it comes, we know that there is a wide world of jealousy and there is nothing personal about it. Wide world of ambition, greed, lust. And now I don't take it on me that, oh, I am so greedy. So that doesn't come to me. I just see it as a force entering. Must fuse into the wider cosmic eye, which comprehends all these smaller cells, or the transcendent of which even the cosmic cell is a diminished image. And even the journey doesn't end at the cosmic consciousness. Further, it goes. So like another imagery that can be used here is when one realizes that we are the vastness of the ocean, and when we see the waves still present, then there is no wave which is more special, more ordinary, less ordinary. We are just waves and just part of this humongous ocean, and things just happening. So there is an impersonality associated with that. Yeah, so just pausing here, and maybe today we can stop here and take more reflections if there are any.
In the later part where it's said about the cosmic eye, it reminded me of a workshop by Dr. Sumitra Basu, and there was a question being asked where somebody asked that how do we get rid of ego? Because in most of the spiritual texts, and even Mother says that to access anything, to even access the cosmic consciousness, the little self has to go. So how to do that? And Dr. Basu, what he said really stayed with me, and he said, it's really hard to get rid of ego, really. Now, Shubhendra has really compartmentalized ego in three forms. There is mental ego, there's vital, and there's physical. Now, even when Mother was, like, you can still get rid of vital and emotional ego through Buddhist practices and, the neti practice and so many other things. But physical ego is nearly impossible. Even when Mother was trying to get rid of the physical ego, she felt that she was disintegrating and she had to invoke the power of Shiva to kind of, So he says, why do we have to take up this such a difficult journey? You know, when we have a simpler path, and the simpler path is just to invoke the psychic consciousness. And that's what really resonated when we were reading about, this merging with the cosmic eye, or, what like Dr. Basu said about the psychic self that we all have. And instead of getting rid of ego, if we focus on cultivating and aggrandizing our psychic self, then it will replace the ego, it will take place of the ego. And hence the path becomes easier than to actually go head on fighting with the ego, which can be sometimes very difficult for people, especially who are, beginning or even in the middle of the journey. So I really like that kind of, feedback from him, and even Shorbindo, it really resonated about merging with the cosmic eye where the ego automatically dissolves.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
In the last part, when you were reading it and talking about it, the visual of, that when in Gita in Kurukshetra, when Krishna
Yeah, I think we lost you for a moment. Here you are.
that was
Yeah, you were
funny.
talking about Krishna and Gita. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying that, how when he showed his Virat root, like how Arjun was talking about the petty, right? Like, Are mera bhai, mera chacha, mera guru. And he was like, what are you talking about, right? And suddenly he showed him that what is the reality. And then it just dropped, like for Arjun, everything just dropped because then he could see the immensity of what is and the smallness of what he is holding on to. Right? Even in Anita Moorjani's first book, right, Dying to Be Me, when she speaks about her near-death experience, at how she says that usually we live life as if we are in a dark warehouse and we are seeing everything as if with a torchlight, right? Like we can just see limited, limited, limited. We don't have the whole picture. And for in that state, she felt as if somebody has switched on the light and now you can see the expansiveness, the grandness, the immensity of what is. And I believe that, that is why all masters and mystics, especially for Mother, she says that keep going back to the experience that you have had, right? Like we've all had some glimpses into the big. We keep shrugging it back, right? Because this seems more real. But if we can remember, because that experience shows us the immensity. There's not a possibility that it doesn't, right? Like it tells us that the things are more. Like my vision is limited. There's more. There's more. So if I'm in constant and as much as possible connection with that experience of immensity, then it's easier for me, a little bit more easier, that to not sway every time and not get stuck. And even if I'm getting stuck, a voice keeps saying that, but you have a choice. You have a choice. So see, you are again getting stuck. So yeah, just that possible, connecting with the immensity, then the small can just like drop off.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Anyone else wants to add on or share anything? Yeah. Now you are okay. Earlier your picture was frozen, but your voice was coming very clearly. So glad for that. Now it's good. Even the picture is good. Yeah. Anyone? Anything? Okay. So I think maybe we can end here today, and maybe crux of the matter as shared by everyone this way or that way, that not to keep fighting with the ego, knowing that it is there, and as Nandini was sharing, that invoking and completely relying on the divine, completely relying on the mother, so that the psychic takes the place, its right place. And there is no need to fight and get rid of the ego sense. It will automatically, as Saru was pointing, that the lower gets dropped off automatically when the bigger and more true takes the charge. So just taking last moment in silence to share, dedicate the merits with all the sentient beings, starting from our homes and to wide, far beyond. May our hearts be content, minds simple, and may we have lots of joy, peace, and progress in life. And may our merits be shared with everyone. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Closing, I wanted to say thank you, especially today is my grandfather's birthday, and I was really close to him. He's no longer there, and he used to read synthesis a lot, especially in
Oh,
his last
wow.
days. So what a coincidence that we are reading synthesis and it's his birthday. So I was just sharing, I was just saying to him that thank you, maybe because you did it. So maybe I'm doing it today. So just felt like sharing that with the group.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure his blessings are with
Beautiful.
all of us and you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Monica.
Thank you. कैसे हो?
मैं ठीक हूँ, आप कैसे हो?
मैं भी ठीक हूँ. All good. All
मैं तो
good. हाँ?
very good. तरुण का कॉल आ रहा है.